Today we're gonna make a major scale. Dr. Dre says it behooves you to stay in school. Okay. If you are in one of my classes, great. We probably won't need Schoology right now. But I like to start every class off just looking at Dr. Dre's face for inspiration. He's a billionaire, you know. Okay, so I'm here in Noteflight. You need to go to Noteflight. You all have a free account on a Noteflight. Now, yours is going to look a little different than mine, but if you go and you choose the default choice on your screen, whatever that may be, it's going to look like mine. Let's discard the changes. All right, so you're going to have what we call no thank you, but let's try that again. Create. I have no idea what just happened. All right, so you're going to have what we call a grand staff. That means a treble clef and a bass clef, and essentially what this means is this middle C on the treble clef is the same thing as this middle C on the bass clef. This is basically where they meet. This is literally the same note. They've separated it to coincide with each clef, but basically the bass clef takes over where the treble clef, quote unquote, leaves off. But anyway, that's neither here nor there. Let's get rid of what I just did right here. We don't need the bass clef. We're not going to work with the bass clef. So I'm going to click on the bass clef itself. I'm not going to click here. I'm not going to click here. I'm not going to click here. I'm going to click on the bass clef itself. And then I'm going to push the delete key. Goodbye. Goodbye. And up here where it says quarter note equals 120, that tells us how fast the quarter note is. Basically, that tells us the tempo. We don't really need to consider ourselves with that either, so I'm going to click on that, highlight that as well, and push delete. Okay. We are going to make let's make a C major scale. So part one will be making a C major scale. So I have to find the note C on the keyboard. Well, we know how to find C on the physical keyboard. Okay. Anywhere we see a set of two, not three, but two black keys, the one on the left, just off to the left on the bottom is a C. And these white keys on the bottom are just the letter names. Okay, just the letter names of notes. Not sharp, not flat. And we'll go over what that means after we do this, but it's just the letter names. So where would that show up on the staff? Let's highlight measure 1. Let's highlight it and then push this C4 key. So C4 will give us that middle C because it's the C in the middle of both clefs. It's in the middle of the treble clef and the bass clef like I just demonstrated before. So we're going to do that again. I'll do that for you one more time. Let me get rid of that. I'm going to highlight measure 1. I'm not going to highlight this. I'm actually going to highlight just somewhere off of it somewhere. Highlight the measure itself. And then, see this keyboard up here, top right will reveal the keyboard. And I'm going to push where it says C4. That's going to give me that key. Now, we're not going to need to work with the keyboard from here on out because I want you to get the practice of manually putting notes in with your mouse. So now I want to put in more notes, but how am I going to do that? You actually have to click on this little squiggly. This little squiggly is called a quarter note rest. And we know this is a quarter note. It's a note that's filled in with a stem. Okay, we've gone over all that already. That's just backtracking. But the associated rest, we have to know how long not to play as well. Well, this little squiggly is a quarter note rest. It says don't play for a beat. This says play the note C for 1 beat. Squiggly says don't play anything for 1 beat. But we actually want to change that because we're writing a scale in all quarter notes. So I'm going to highlight that to tell the program that, oh, look, I actually do want to put something here. Now, if I go too far to the left, I see nothing. If I go too far to the right, I see nothing. I have to go right over this little squiggly, and I'll see the little ghost of a note. And I'm going to bring this down, and that's a C again. That's C4 again. Well, I want to go 1 note up. Boom. Now, A, B, C, D. This must be the note D. Now I want to add more. So I'm going to come over here. I'm going to highlight this little top hat of this is a half note rest. See, we have 4/4. The top number, again, this is just review. Top number tells us how many beats in a measure. We have 4 beats in a measure. The bottom number tells us which type of note gets 1 beat. Well, we have choices: whole note, half note, quarter note, or eighth note. And if the bottom number is 4, again, this is all review, that means the quarter note, 4 equals quarter note, gets 1 beat. So I've taken care of beat 1 with a C. I've taken care of beat 2 with a D. Now this little top hat says, oh, but there needs to be a placeholder for the last 2 beats in the measure. You can't just have nothing. You can't have just like nothing there. You have to tell the person playing the music or reading the music not to play for 2 beats. So this little top hat is called a half note rest. It says don't play anything for 2 beats, but we actually do want to put a note in there. We want to put 2 more notes in here. So we're going to highlight the little top hat, the half note rest, and somewhere in this plane of existence here, we're going to put the next note is here. C, D, E. Oh, line, arguably a space, line again. Now, see, on mine it wrote a half note. I don't want a half note. I actually want a quarter note because we're going to do this all in quarter notes. So I have to change this to quarter note. So I'm going to come up here, up to the top, where all my palettes are. And in orange, I have this palette that says duration, and I'm going to choose quarter note. Now, if I don't have the duration palette open, I can come here to the palettes menu and find the word that says duration and make sure that it's checked. Oh, look, there it is. And it reveals itself. Now, I guess I can go right over to the next squiggly and put the next note in. This is nothing new. A lot of you have already done this before. Some of you have had my class before, and some of you have already done this assignment before. So, and that's fine too. It's a quirky program. It's a web-based program, so you didn't have to download anything, and you made a free account. But I digress. Finish off the scale here. I went from C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C. And if I kept going, D, E, F, G, but I'm just going to go 1 octave. Octave means from C up to the C here. Because we know spaces spell face. F-A-C, C-E. And we know that lines are every good burger deserves fries. Those are spaces and lines. You could always go look that up on the internet. What are the treble clef space names? What are the treble clef line names? And you'll get the same thing I just told you. You could have that as reference. So this is a C major scale. Now, if you look at the keyboard down here, you're going to notice that it's going to be all these keys right here. C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C. Okay. Do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do. Okay, it's a major scale. It's a C major scale. Now, the key of C does not have any what we call sharps or flats. And even if you don't know what that is yet, this is what a sharp looks like. It's not a hashtag. Please don't call it a hashtag in front of me. Don't do that. And this little fancy B is called a flat. And we'll look at what they do momentarily. But I do want to draw your attention down here. Let me start on this first note again. Now, we had talked about in class this concept of half step and whole step. Now we're looking at the piano now. A half step is literally the next available note, which would be this key right here. I'm not going to press it because it'll put it up here. But a whole step is when we skip an available note in between, and I would end up here. And that's what we have. From the first note of the scale, or rather the first scale degree, to the second note of the scale, or rather the second scale degree, we have a whole step. We went from this C to this D, and we skipped that available key in between. That's what a whole step is. Now, from the second note of the scale, the second scale degree, to the third scale degree, we went from D to A. From D to E, C, D, E. But look, we skipped this note in between. This was also a whole step. Now, the reason why I'm starting you with the key of C is to show you this concept. From E to F is a half step. The colors do not matter. The positions, high or low, do not matter. The definition is literally the next available key from E, nothing in between, to literally the next available key to F is a half step. Now that's the first half step that we've seen so far in the major scale, from the third note to the fourth note. So from the third note to the fourth note of a major scale is, as far as we can tell, the only half step we have so far. Let's see what happens if we go further. All right. So from the fourth note of the scale to the fifth note of the scale. Oh, I went from here, this F, skip, to this G. I skipped an available note in between. That's a whole step. All right, this is the fifth note of the scale. What happens if I go from the fifth note to the sixth note? Okay, let's see. I'm here. Now the next note is here. Oh, I went from G to, well, we only have A through G. So it starts again at A. So if this is G, well, this must be A again. But more importantly, physically on the keyboard, we skipped this available key in between, which means that's also a whole note. So far, the only half step we've seen is between the third note here and the fourth note here. Curious. Okay. That's the sixth note of the scale. Let's see what happens, the distance on the keyboard, again, if I go from the sixth note of the scale to the seventh note of the scale. Whoa! I've gone from this A, skip, to this B. We skipped this key in between. That's another whole step. I haven't had another half step yet. Interesting. Still, the only half step I've had is between the third note, this E, and the fourth note, this F. See, because there's nothing in between. Everything else so far has been a whole step. All right, so I left off here on the seventh note of the scale. Now I want to get to, we can call this 8. It's really not 8, it's 1 again. It's another C. C4, C5, still the letter C. I know that's a strange concept. You're like, but it's all the way over here. How's that the same note? Well, we don't get too far into the physics of it, but the molecules in the air are just vibrating twice as fast, so it's the same letter. We'll just call it the same letter up an octave. For our purposes right now, that's sufficient. So if I go from this B, and the next note here is this C, I did not skip anything between. This was literally the next available note. So from the seventh note to the octave, or we'll call it 7 to 8, or 7 to 1, 7 to the octave, T to Do, there's a half step between the seventh note and the octave. Just like there's a half step between the third note and the fourth note. So between 3 and 4 and 7 and, we'll call it 8, knowing that 8 is just the octave, it's just 1 again. 3 and 4, 7 and 8 are the only two half steps in a major scale. All the other notes are separated by a whole step. Now, let's see what happens if we change that sequence of half steps and whole steps within the octave. I'm going to come over here to this E. I'm going to bring this down by a half step by putting, now I told you I'd let you know what these sharps and flats do, by putting a flat next to it. Look at the piano keys, and see what happens to this E. I make it E flat. Went down by a half step. Now I'm going to take this A, and I'm going to bring it down by a half step by putting a flat next to it. Now I'm going to take this B, and I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to play this. I want you to listen to it. Does this sound like a major scale? Do, where's the first note? Do, do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do, ti, la, sol, fa, mi, re, do. No, in fact, it sounds a little more serious, a little more sad, if you will. It's a C something scale, but it's not a C major scale. So I'm going to get those flats out of there. Any minute, there we go. The point is, I have all the letter names represented. I didn't skip any letter names. I went spaced, line to space, space to line, all the way up to the octave. I didn't skip any letters. All the letters are represented. C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C, D, E, F, G. It would just go on and go on and go on if I kept going up. All the letters are represented. But then the sequence of half steps and whole steps within the octave is what gives us the sound of any particular scale. And since we base pretty much all of our knowledge, at least for right now, off the major scale, We want to make a major scale. So the formula is, let me see if I can get a text box here. T. The only two half steps, and again, we use the piano to work that out. We got the letters. This is a placeholder for letters. The staff is just a placeholder for letters. The keyboard, we can really visualize half steps and whole steps. So we have two ways of looking at intervals. Intervals, distances between two notes. The only two half steps in a major scale are between the third and fourth notes, third and fourth scale degrees, and seventh and octave, 8 scale degrees. And I know scale degrees is a fancy term, but it just means which note in the scale. So if I choose this one, let's see, which scale degree is this? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. It's the 6th scale degree. The 6th note of the major scale. That's all. So that's how we figured out which notes are half steps, which notes are whole steps, and we got our little, I guess, formula to make a major scale. Now, since we know the formula, we could arguably make a major scale from any note. And that is going to be the topic of the next video. Thanks for watching. Come on back.